This is the Sean Hannity Show podcast. This is how we roll. We light it up with our hands up. This is how we
roll. There are so many things that we, not I, we could have done to enhance the campaign of one candidate over another.
A President Donald Trump is going to focus on confronting and defeating radical Islamic terrorism. And we're going to have a president again who will never say what we'll never do.
I am extremely proud of the fact that over 8 years, we have not had the kinds of scandals that have plagued other administrations.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution. We burning down the night, shooting bullets at the moon, baby. This is how we roll. Sean Hannity. The new Sean Hannity Show. More behind-the-scenes information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America.
This is Jonathan Gilliam filling in for Sean Hannity on the Sean Hannity Radio Show. And it's almost Thanksgiving, folks. Great to be back here. Those of you that don't know who I am, and I'm surprised there's still people that don't know who I am. I'm just kidding. I'm actually very humble. I'm a former Navy SEAL, Federal Air Marshal, security contractor, and FBI special agent here in New York, and a Sirius XM Patriot Channel fill-in host for David Webb, Andrew Wilkow, Sean Hannity, and as I made the mistake of saying 2 days ago, Andrew Webb. Nobody knows who that is, but I guess it's the combination of David Webb and Andrew Wilkow. So we got a lot to talk about. It's this is the first time I've been back on this show. Actually, it's the second time. I was on once for a guest since Trump won the campaign for president of the United States and is now the president-elect. And I've kind of structured this show in a way to bring subject matter experts on here to inform not only the American people, but listen, I'm not a Trump surrogate. I'm not an advisor. So I'm going to try to bring on as many subject matter experts I am to get the word to him of what we feel. Now, first and foremost, when I say we, I mean the American people. I mean, look, this is a fact. The American people were the lobbyists that won this election. It wasn't some lobbyist group from Washington, D.C. It wasn't, different people that have special interests. We have one special interest. The people that elected Donald Trump this time had one main special interest, and that's freedom. That's the Constitution. We did have a sub-interest in that, and that's getting rid of Hillary Clinton and the whole Clinton organized crime syndicate, which, as of now, their money base and their ability to maneuver has been slowed down. Don't think that they're gone. In fact, I do a show every night, 9 p.m. on Facebook Live on my Facebook page, Jonathan T. Gilliam. It's called The Experts. I have a great group of loyal listeners. And one day I was sitting there, the show was about to begin, and it was the night after, I think, when Hillary Clinton came out and gave her speech about her conciliatory speech. She waited a day to do that. I guess she was having a bit of a fit the night before. And as I watched her speak, before I did my show, something just came over me, and I wrote down a few words, and I wanted to share those words for you here today as we get started, because I think it's important for the American people to realize something, that warriors like myself, the people that are out there listening, the one percenters, the true one percenters that serve in the military, 1% of the population. We know that when you win a victory, you don't go back to sleep. And today, one of the things I'm going to talk about is the biggest national security threat that we have in this country. And I'll just be honest with you. I'm going to put it on us. I'm going to show you how it leads up to that. But the reality is the American citizenry going back to sleep is the biggest national security threat that we have in this country. So with that, here's what I wrote down that day. And forgive me if it's a little bit poetic, but I'm a poet and I didn't even know it, so here we go. That dominating arm of the corrupt and controlling deceivers is desperately flexing their muscles, trying ever so hard to push back that which makes America great. What we have seen over the past year and what we are seeing now in the streets, on TV, online, and in the whispers of gossip, that is America's enemy. For those of you that think the fight is over and that it's okay to fall back asleep, rest not, for our fight has just begun. Sleep not, rest not, and trust not, for the serpent is tightening its grip a while longer. But now, the difference from yesterday is that we know who the serpent is. Although the head has many faces, politics, media, science, activists, big money, its message is clear. That great serpent does not do its own bidding either. In fact, it uses us, it uses the earth, it uses the people, like the moon uses the tides of the ocean to control the inhabitants of the earth. However, like the tides show us the power of the moon, so does the serpent and its minions show us the opposite of good. And so they expose the good in our own hearts. We are the good guys, the white hats, the victors of honor that rule the arena of freedom. Fall not back to sleep, America, and rest not. When the war is over, we can sleep. And this war has just begun. So I hope you feel that. I hope you understand what I'm trying to convey in those words. That after I watched Hillary Clinton give her speech, and I looked at her and Bill Clinton, and I reflected on the Make America Great movement that Trump gave a voice to. Trump gave a voice to us. I don't know what he's going to do over the next 4 years, but I do know what he allowed to happen because he stepped up to the plate over this past year. He gave us a voice. And so it's time for us to step up to the plate and stay on this. And one of the things that I talk about nightly on my show, The Experts, on Facebook Live, 9 p.m., is that dialogue is the beginning of unity. And unity is the biggest cannon we could ever find to take out that enemy. I mean, you saw that, folks. You saw a movement over the past year, a movement that was already inside the majority of America. We know something's wrong. And so we started to have dialogue. As Trump went around the country, as the news skewed their reporting, as they started colluding, well, they've always colluded with the Democratic Party, sharing information for the debates, making fake news. I don't know where Mark Zuckerberg's going with this fake news thing on Facebook. Why don't he turn the TV on and look at CNN and MSNBC? You'll see plenty of fake news there. Why don't they stop that? But as this stuff started becoming known to us, the voice that's inside of us started to grow. And so did the dialogue. People would go to these rallies. They would go home and talk. They would go to the rallies. They would see these people coming in there and causing trouble. They would watch on TV, and it would be reported as though it was their fault, when it was really plants, as Project Veritas exposed, plants by the Democratic Party. And have you noticed that no matter what rules they break, what laws they break, as far as campaign laws, nobody gets in trouble for that. Nobody gets convicted of anything. Now, if you and I did that, it'd be totally different. We'd go to jail. But what was exposed to us was this two-class system that we have in this country. Now, you may think that the middle class is one group and that the lower class is another group. That's economics. When it comes to the judicial system, which I worked under and swore an oath to, the reality is there are two classes. There's the ruling party, and then there's the rest of us. The ruling party doesn't live by the rules. We do. They don't get punished. We do. And that was exposed to us. That was exposed to us over the past year of this presidential campaigning and election process. And so I say to you, America, now as we get ready to go to break, do not fall back asleep. Trump did a great thing, but what's going to make America great is you and I. We can have a great leader, but it's going to take the people. It's going to take the people to come together. And let's be honest, Mr. Trump gets up there and gets guided in the wrong direction by these politicians. Well, it's going to take our voice to straighten that out. Let's take a break. Find me on Twitter, @JGilliam_seal, and on Facebook at Jonathan T. Gilliam. Go check out my show. They're all listed on there. The Experts. It's every night, 9 p.m. weeknights. And we'll be right back. This is Sean Hannity Radio Show.
Hannity Headline, a bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you everywhere you go. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
The whole world is watching. 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 Black Lives Matter. 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 My body, my choice. Your body, your choice. My body, my choice. Donald Trump is got to go. Hey, Donald Trump, go away. Racist, sexist, anti-gay. Donald Trump, go away. Racist, sexist, anti-gay. Donald Trump, go away. Racist, sexist, anti-gay. White supremacy, save our humanity. And white supremacy, save our humanity. And white supremacy. Trump, 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 Trump. Not my president. Not my president. Not my president. Not my president.
As you can hear, there are chants of not my president. There's also chants of Mike Pence, the vice president-elect, along with Donald Trump. I'm also seeing LGBTQ flags, signs that say unity and love. I don't even know what you call that.
So there you go, folks. That these people are chanting "not my president" and this and that about Trump, and that he hasn't even gone into office yet. I can imagine them by January 5th, they're going to be like, "Not my president." It's going to be bad and good. But listen, what you're listening to right there, I'm going to give some of those people the benefit of the doubt that they have their hearts are in the right place. They want to do what's right, but they're sheep. They're being led by trained operatives of a subversive group, which I was on Bill O'Reilly's show last night talking about the reality of Marxism and communism. And people were blown away about this when that wasn't why I was initially on there, but when I was talking about Black Lives Matter and Mayor de Blasio here in New York being a lot of Marxists and communists at the top of those groups, and Mayor de Blasio is a communist, people were tweeting me saying communism is dead. Well, I have somebody on the show that's going to disagree with that. David Horowitz, he's a Freedom Center and former communist activist, joins the show now. And I brought him on, but I was talking to Lauren when we were booking guests, and she suggested David, and when she told me about him and I started looking into it, I'm amazed, and I can't think of somebody better to talk about what I think is probably one of the biggest national security threats that we have, the subversive tactics of the left and how Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals shaped the modern-day Democratic Party. Most people are completely skipping over this threat. So, David, thanks for being here, and your story is fascinating.
Well, thanks for having me. I don't think you should give too many of these people the benefit of the doubt. Problem is that our school systems, from kindergarten through graduate school, have been turned over to the communist left. And I use that, as you know, my parents were communists, so I use that advisedly. Mm-hmm. These people, these youngsters, are taught to hate America. They're taught that some of them don't even know that America is not the only country that had slavery. In fact, America is the country that liberated the slaves.
Right.
Every Black American, every black in this country owes his or her freedom to America. And it's ironic and very sad that we have now the biggest racist movement in America.
Well, it's interesting.
Is Black Lives Matter.
Exactly, and that's one thing that I think that people don't realize. They think in order to take over a country or to cause disruption, you got to come in guns a-blazing like Red Dawn or like Hitler did in World War II. But what you really have to do in a country that's free is go in and secrete yourself into the education system, into Washington, D.C., and eventually you'll cause a big enough problem and a big enough shift in the population, which they've done.
That's actually the entire message of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, which is the guide for Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama was trained as an Alinsky activist. The National Education Association recommends it as a guide for its organizers. That's the biggest union in America, the teachers' union. And Alinsky, I mean, I remember Alinsky when I was a radical, and the one redeeming feature that radicals had in the 60s was that they told people what they wanted. I mean, our chants were, we want a revolution and we want it now, up against the wall, and things like that. Bring the war home, the Vietnam War, bring it home. These were terrible slogans, but they warned people what we were about. And Alinsky's book was written as a critique of the New Left. Mm-hmm. He says in the book that the New Left was right to want to burn America down. That's who Alinsky was. That's who Hillary Clinton's mentor was. He wanted to burn the system down. But New Leftists were stupid to telegraph that.
Which they did. This past year they big time telegraphed it.
So Alinsky's argument was to infiltrate the Democratic Party, conceal your agendas, just push the envelope just as far as it might go. So, when you want to have government control of everybody's health care and all the information that goes with it and the ability, you want the government to control whether you can extend your life or not by getting, operations or what have you. Mm-hmm. That's not the way they sold it. They sold it by lying. If you keep your doctor, you can keep your plan. They didn't say they were going to have death panels. It was very shrewd of Sarah Palin to point that out. Of course, when the government controls health care, it's going to be rationed.
Let me ask you this, because we have a limited amount of time, and you're so fascinating. We do a whole show with you. How did you? Oh, so you kind of grew up in communism, but how did? No, let me scratch that thought. What do they hate about the system? Let's start with that first and foremost.
Well,
what do they hate about freedom?
I used to get asked this all the time. How can you hate America? That's the real question. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you look at the world as it is, and all the countries in it, America is the most tolerant, best place on earth. And the evidence of that is all the people who want to come here, all the Haitians, all the Mexicans, all whatever. People want to come here because it's the best place on earth. But that's not the way the left thinks. The left has this fantasy. They call it it used to be called communism and socialism. Now it's called social justice. That there's going to be a world of perfect equality. Everybody's going to be equal. There'll be no racism, no sexism, no, on and on like that. No war, no borders. Mm-hmm. That's their vision. And compared to this, it's really a vision of a heaven on earth. I mean, I always tell people that the left is a crypto religion. It's modeled on Christianity. The world is a fallen place. There's going to be a redemption. And the difference between the left and a true religious person is that somebody who's truly religious understands that the problems of the world are created by us and can't be fixed by us.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because in the beginning, after I watched Hillary Clinton give her her spill the day after she lost, I wrote this poem, and what came out as I'm writing that poem is a serpent, the serpent, because I look at communism, and people are still amazed that I'm talking about communism. They think that communism is dead, but I look at that as the great deceiver. Communism is the great deceiver.
Exactly right, and the deception. You remember what the serpent says in the garden? It says to Adam and Eve, "Eat of that tree, and you shall be as God."
That's right.
And that's what the left thinks of themselves. They think they're gods. They can recreate the world. And that's why they're so dangerous. They're what I call social redeemers.
Let me say something to that real quick. If you notice, in the Garden of Eden, Satan himself didn't eat of the apple, right? He convinced them to eat of it, and that's exactly what's happening here. They're convincing these people that you'll be like God, when in reality, the only people in a communist world that are like God, or they're not like God, but that rule are the people at the top. It becomes a complete class system of the haves and have-nots.
Right. Unfortunately, leftists don't look at reality. And once you understand they're delusional,
can you convince them?
Look at what the Democratic Party is doing now.
Yeah.
It's failed. Obama, 8 years of Obama, everybody except the very rich got poorer. It's a disaster, Obama's 8 years. And the Democrats are now, they're a bi-coastal party. They're facing utter ruin. Under Obama, I can't remember how many senatorships, governorships, 33 state legislatures they lost. And what's their response? Their response is to support Keith Ellison, a Farrakhan racist, Jew hater, and protege of the Muslim Brotherhood, to be the DNC chair. Mm-hmm. Their answer is to go further left. They're delusional. People have to understand that.
That's why groups like Black Lives Matter, if you look at their top echelon, they're Marxists. They follow the same exact.
Look at all the black people they've gotten killed, not to mention brave officers.
Right.
I mean, every time, in the last year, there were the shootings of officers, the chief of police was black.
Right.
I mean, what are these? And these people talk Americans white supremacists. Anybody who says that should be put in an institution. I'm not a prison, but a mental institution.
Now, listen, I only got a few minutes left, and
Sure.
America needs your advice. Is there any way, because we have, largely half the voting population in this country, have fallen prey to this serpent? How does somebody like you see the light? What happened, and how do we convince these people?
I'm not a good example, because what happened was the Black Panther Party murdered a friend of mine. And it happened at the same time that the left was victorious in Vietnam, forced America's withdrawal, and 2.5 million poor Indo-Chinese were slaughtered by the communists. There were no protests from the left, because the left was it's not an anti-war movement. It's an anti-America movement.
Right.
What's necessary is that for conservatives to come out of the woodwork and start standing up. I mean, Trump has given a really good model of just staring them down and going in their face. People have until now been intimidated. They don't want to be called racist. They don't want to be called deplorable.
Right.
But now,
we embrace it.
That was a tactic of the left. When you get called a name, you adopt the name,
right,
and throw it right back in their faces.
And that works. It works. It works. And the other thing they do greatly is they make truth. So they can take a lie, repeat it over and over again, and create a truth. And they're really good at that.
Well, because they control, by their control of the schools,
right.
They train the judges, they train the journalists. The journalism schools are completely leftist schools. There are no conservatives sitting on their faculties. It's just terrible.
Okay, I got 1 minute. I got 1 minute left. Let me ask you: Is there anything we can do when we sit down with people to convince them otherwise? Is it just a lost hope?
Well, some people you can persuade, but to me, the most important thing is to fight fire with fire.
Mm-hmm.
The Democratic Party is a party of hate, and it's a racist party. It's the party that's put racial categories into every aspect of American life. It's the party that controls the inner cities, all of them, all the major inner cities in America, everything that's wrong with them, every oppressive part of them, the Democratic Party is responsible for. So you just have to turn their guns around, basically.
Listen, David,
and,
I got to...
I actually have, on January 20th, I've got a new book that's coming out. It's called The Big Agenda.
The Big Agenda. I'm going to I'll put that on my my Twitter site. But listen, I want to thank you, founder of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and former communist activist, David Horowitz. I'm glad you're on our side.
Well, I'm happy to talk to you, and thank you for your service.
You got it. God bless.
This is the Sean Hannity Show podcast.
There are so many things that we, not I, we could have done to enhance the campaign of one candidate over another.
A President Donald Trump is going to focus on confronting and defeating radical Islamic terrorism. And we're going to have a president again who will never say what we'll never do.
I am extremely proud of the fact that over 8 years, we have not had the kinds of scandals that have plagued other administrations.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution.
We burning down the night, shooting bullets at the moon, baby. This is how we roll.
Sean Hannity. The new Sean Hannity Show. More behind-the-scenes information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't have a strategy yet.
Let's make two things clear. ISIL is not Islamic.
Did we underestimate ISIL? I think that there is no doubt that their advance, their movement over the last several months has been more rapid than the intelligence estimates and I think the expectations of policymakers both in and outside of Iraq.
What I do insist on is that we maintain proper perspective and that we do not provide a victory to these terrorist networks by overinflating their importance and suggesting in some fashion that they are an existential threat to the United States or the world order. From the start, our goal has been first to contain, and we have contained them. They have not gained ground in Iraq, and in Syria, they'll come in, they'll leave, but you don't see this systematic march by ISIL across the terrain. They're a bunch of killers with good social media.
Long way from when you described them as a JV team. Was that bad intelligence or your misjudgment?
Keep in mind, I wasn't specifically referring to ISIL. I've said that regionally, there were a whole series of organizations that were focused primarily locally, weren't focused on the homeland.
You don't believe these people?
Not yet, but they can evolve.
We have to make sure that we keep a clear-eyed view about what needs to be done. ISIL is not going to pose an existential threat to us.
ISIL has not had a major successful offensive operation in either Syria or Iraq in a full year.
This is Jonathan Gilliam filling in for Sean Hannity on the Hannity Radio Show, and I'm sorry I made you listen to that guy's voice for so long, but I felt it was important for you to reflect on the incompetency of this administration that's going to be leaving, and you can compare and contrast that with what is coming into this is going to be the next administration, Donald Trump. And, man, I really, really hope that General Mattis is the Secretary of Defense. That's the one pick that I'm behind 100%. And, listen, folks, it's important for you to realize this. And this is another thing that I want to make sure that, again, I said earlier today that the lobbyist group that put President Trump into office was the American people. And I want to keep that focus. I want everybody to realize that. But I also want Mr. Trump to realize that as well. And the American people, that we're made up of a lot of great subject matter experts. And the subject matter experts that I'm about to bring on this show agree with me in a lot of ways that this is not radical Islam. This is, by and large, the fighters are fundamental Islam. And as I said earlier, you have the Muslims who you live with peacefully, not really interested in a fight. You have the Islamists that follow fundamental Islam, and they would support a fight by and large. They're not going to voice against it, maybe not fight in it. And then you have the jihadists, the actual fighters. That's the reality. You can call it ISIL, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever you want. It's not radical, it's fundamental, and it's not one group. It's a global ideology. So joining me now, this is the next step in our national security roundup, is Rich Higgins, Vice President, Intelligence and National Security Programs, former manager with the Department of Defense, DOD, Combating Terrorism Technical Support Office and Irregular Warfare Program, and Dr. Sebastian Gorka, probably one of the greatest voices on television and radio, Major General C. Matthews Horner, Distinguished Chair of Military Theory and at the Marine Corps University and author of the New York Times bestseller, Defeating Jihad. Welcome both guys. I'm glad that you're here. I couldn't think of two better people to bring on and speak from, the academic side, the operational side, and overall the reality, the side of reality, which is not being has not been in place over the past 8 years. So thanks for both of you for being here.
Hey, John.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, John.
So let me start with Rich. Rich, I want to ask you real quick. You said a lot of stuff about the Muslim Brotherhood. What do you think, and then I'll have Dr. Gorka follow up on this, what do you think is going to happen now? Because you've had in-depth experience with these individuals and the reality of how many of them have secreted themselves into this administration. What's your prediction? What's going to happen now with the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, I think the new Attorney General is going to have his hands full getting his arms around the scope of what's transpired. I think that the Trump administration will have a laser-like focus. The end of the day where the law college professor is setting the table and leading from behind, as it were, where he thinks that a weak America is better for the world, is it's coming in here. And what you're going to see is what we've done is we've basically set up a reality that is defined by narratives. And for the Obama administration, what you saw was when your whole reality is defined by narratives, you believe that speaking about him can actually make him stronger. What we've seen is the Muslim Brotherhood hijack so many of our decisions over the past several years. And I think what's going to happen right now in the immediate near term is they're going to modulate their message and try and get in with the Trump administration. Over time, they'll find that ineffective, and we could see them either recede, from the political scene here for a while, or more likely line up with the folks like in your last segment, the hard left Marxist elements. And we're already starting to see that on the campuses around the United States.
Dr. Gorka?
To quote a certain individual called Rich Higgins, who I worked with at National Defense University, when the enemy gets to control what you're allowed to say about them, they're already winning. Well, that changes on January 20th. Mm-hmm. The censorship, the ideologically driven perversion of the intelligence cycle under the Obama administration will end when the new sheriff arrives, and that's Donald Trump. Look at his speeches. Look at the Pennsylvania Philly speech. Look at the Gettysburg speech. We are going to talk truthfully about the enemy, about the ideology of global jihadism, and everybody that propagates it, starting with the Muslim Brotherhood. This will be a very, very different White House.
Now, what do you think the chances are of them actually, though, doing, what any intelligence agency would do and secreting themselves in some way in a lower area of policy, perhaps, or joining forces in a broader scale with groups like disruptive groups like Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Party?
Well, John, first off, they already are working with them. We see this, from the tactical level at a university where the Muslim Students Association, a Muslim Brotherhood affiliate group, is working with left-wing agitation groups, all the way up to the international level where the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is working through groups like the OSCE and groups inside the EU. They've created this counter state. And I think what you'll see them do in the immediate term is, from a tradecraft perspective, they'll either go to ground, like you said, and work at the state and local level, maybe avoiding some of the federal exposure that they would have to a group like the FBI, and more likely, moving inside things like textbook reviews and school book content, and continuing to shape that narrative that says, Islam has nothing to do with it. Islam is a religion of peace. You don't need to know about this. And I think what Seb was hitting on there is exactly what we're going to see happen on January 20th, which is at the federal level. The president can control what the federal government does, but this fight has to go all the way down to the state and local, and even down to your local school board level. People need to have it society-wide, just like we did in the Cold War.
Yeah, I think one thing I always talk about is, especially with communism, and a lot of other different groups, they subvert themselves into groups that people would never even recognize, which is like the PTO, the parent teachers organizations, the school boards. They put themselves in there and from the bottom up a lot of times, and that's how they don't have to have guns and bullets to really cause disruption and change things. But Dr. Gorka, my question now is, is Donald Trump looking at this from a strategic standpoint? Because that's been the problem, when I was in the military, when I was in the Air Marshal program, and even in the FBI, I didn't feel as though there was a strategic plan, which I've talked over and over about. I'd never felt like there was a strategic war plan.
No, there hasn't. There's been a death of 1,000 cuts in the last 15 years, even under the Bush administration. You talk to people who are inside the machine, talk to people like Rich, talk to the senior military officers. The fact is, we have been without a strategy for 15 years. We have become the most powerful nation the world has ever seen. We are the greatest nation on this earth, but we have been completely tactical in this war because the administration has denied who the enemy is and what they believe. This changes. Just listen to Donald Trump's speeches. Go to the website. Look at the plan of action. Look at the fact that he talks about radical Islamic terrorism. Look at the fact that he talks about the need to destroy the ideology of the jihadists. From day one, he's got Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the most senior military intelligence officer inside the defense establishment. That is his national security advisor. He's got Representative Pompeo, who understands the threat implicitly as his CIA director designate. And then he's got his new AG in Sessions, who likewise understands the need for a strategy. So just look, he is bringing not only the A game, he is bringing the A team, and it will be like a breath of fresh air January 21st.
Now I'm gonna play devil's advocate to that, okay?
Go ahead.
The American people, and myself included, I'm tired of politicians being recycled into cabinet positions. Why is it that, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, I'm a fan of these guys that you're talking about, but why is it that we don't have a former CIA guy, managing the CIA, somebody who was an operator in the NSA that worked their way up the system that's managing that? Why do we have to have recycled politicians put into these positions?
Look, I have a particular opinion on this, and Rich can give you his. It's the nature of the beast. In a democracy, a cabinet member is there because he represents the political responsibility. He's there because the president has chosen him to bear the political mandate for that department. There is a lot of logic. You don't make a general practitioner the Secretary of Health. You don't make an individual who understands the tactical and operational aspects of a particular, a game warden does become the Secretary of the Interior. That individual is there because they bear the political responsibility, not the technical responsibility.
Rich?
I'll echo that, John. I'll say they do bear the political responsibility, and for the listening audience, pay close attention to who they bring in as their deputies.
Correct.
The deputies are going to be the people who make the institutions run day to day.
Gotcha. While
the directors function as the political leadership, and frankly, they have to make the deals around Washington resources, allocation, priorities.
Exactly.
So that they have to play in that political sphere. It is the deputies who will execute the mission day to day.
Listen, we got to take a break. If you guys want to stay on, we'll come back for another short part of this segment. I'd like to ask you at least one more question. But I understand that, and it's funny that you say that because that was always my biggest gripe with the FBI. The biggest, most incompetent people in the Bureau are the deputy directors. This is Sean Hannity Show. You can find me on Twitter at @Gilliam_Seal and on Facebook at Jonathan T. Gilliam. Follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, and we'll be right back. I'm going to be taking your calls here in just a little bit as well. We'll be right back.
Hannity Headline, a bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you everywhere you go. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
This is Jonathan Gilliam. And as he just said right there, this is the Sean Hannity radio show, 800-941-SEAN, 800-941-7326. And I'll be getting to some calls eventually, but I've got such a good lineup for you here. I'm bringing Jessica Vaughan on right now, and what I want to talk with Jessica about, she's a director of policy studies at the Center for Immigration Studies, and I want to get into, there's been a lot of stuff in the mainstream media, of course, about Donald Trump going back on his pledges and saying all this thing. They're spinning all this stuff up now. There's no evidence of any of this stuff of Donald Trump going back on what he campaigned for. But I wanted to get Jessica's kind of her idea of how President-elect Trump should handle this. I have my own idea, which I want to run by Jessica as well. So thank you for joining me, Jessica.
Glad to be here, Jonathan.
So, what do you think? How do you think he is going to handle the country's immigration crisis? Is it going to be in line with what he campaigned on? How much compromises are going to have to be on this? Because there will always be some compromise.
Well, sure. Judging by the statements he's made and the picks for his cabinet so far, I think it's clear that what he's going to do is restore enforcement of immigration laws and start working for immigration policies that benefit our nation as a whole and Americans, and go after sanctuary cities, for example. Let the immigration officers who are responsible for enforcing our law, like the Border Patrol and ICE, let them do their job. I think that he's going to end the efforts to prosecute states and local governments that want to help with immigration enforcement and restore partnerships with state and local law enforcement agencies. All of these things are going to mean that we're going to have the rule of law restored in immigration policy and lead to a smaller population of illegal immigrants and fewer people trying to get here illegally. And there are a number of ways he can do this through his authority as president. I think the first thing he wants to do is rescind all of the improper executive actions that President Obama did that have brought us to this state of immigration anarchy. But then, I have a feeling that he's probably going to want to work for some legislative changes as well. But there's a lot of things he can do on his own. And as I said, the first thing is to just let the career men and women in the immigration enforcement agencies do their jobs, end the catch and release, and that's going to make a big difference by itself.
Now, let me ask you this. I came up with this idea. Actually, Rich Higgins, I just had on talking about Islam and the threat that Islam poses and how Donald Trump's going to handle that. So I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago about an idea that I came up with and other people may have come up with a similar idea, but I don't understand. It would be this whole talk about a registry thing started coming up, and that's going to cause problems as soon as that gets on TV. Why would it be a good idea if we came up with a contract for undocumented workers, right? We could call it whatever it's going to make the left happy, because you have to appease the left somewhat. So we come up with a contract for people who are here and can show proof that they've been working, and they have to sign this contract, and they'll get a worker's ID, but the contract is very, very stringent. And if they break any of the things on the contract, see, here's the catch is you sign this contract, you have to follow the law to the T, because if you do anything wrong, then you're booted out forever, never to come back. So is something like that, could that be done? And why wouldn't they do that where because exactly what you're saying. I have a lot of good friends that are in ICE. I used to be an FBI agent, and I've dealt with illegals, and they need to focus on the bad guys. And the one way that we could do that, I'm not for amnesty, but I am for giving people that are already working, giving them a break, but making them, because amnesty kind of just gives, you're here, stay here. I'm okay with giving them a break as long as there's a standard that they have to be held to, and if they break that standard, they're gone. That way the ICE, guys that belong to ICE, the men and women that are going out there finding these people, enforcing the laws that are on the books, can focus solely on them and put all their manpower towards that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree that sworn law enforcement officers at ICE and Border Patrol, they need to be freed up to focus on the biggest problems, the criminal aliens. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple of problems with what you suggest, and one is that, first of all, a lot of illegal aliens are committing other crimes because if they're working here illegally, they're usually committing ID theft or misrepresenting themselves or, other problems.
Right.
So, that in itself on a practical level makes it difficult. But the main problem is that they are here working in jobs that unemployed Americans and legal immigrants should have first access to. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that there may be a point in time when we can move to some kind of legalization for certain illegal aliens who are here, but we cannot do that until enforcement is restored, so that we won't repeat the mistakes of the past, where the amnesty came at the beginning and then the enforcement promises were never met. We need to restore enforcement first, make sure that's working,
right,
so that anyone who is legalized is not replaced by more illegal immigrants who come in with the expectation of eventually getting amnesty. So I don't want to say that's completely off the table, but we need to recognize, first of all, that illegal immigration is not this benign thing that does, it disadvantages Americans and legal immigrants in the workforce. And secondly, we have to do things in the proper sequence to make sure that it actually helps solve the problem.
See, that sequence there is, and I agree with everything you're saying, that sequence, though, is where I'm concerned, because from a law enforcement perspective, if you can get certain people to come out and expose themselves and say, this is who I am, and give them that, not only are you giving them an opportunity, but you're also, now you can track them. Now you have their fingerprints. Now you have, you have them on contract. The problem I'm seeing with this whole process is what you're talking about, the process of not going too far, too fast one way, and then the other problem is the resources and manpower to go and get the bad people and the people who are breaking laws. I mean, at what laws do we say, okay, we're going to forgive this. If you have a fake ID, bring that in, you're going to surrender that, and we're going to give you a real ID. I mean, something like that. But the ICE and the other agencies are just going to be so overloaded. And what's crazy is, in the cities where there's the most illegal aliens is where they're going to have the hardest time, because the city officials just won't cooperate.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I can understand that. The sanctuary cities need to be dealt with, because these policies are a hazard for public safety in the community, and then we need to stop the obstruction of enforcement that's happening in these cities. And there are ways that ICE resources can be used very effectively to go after the 2 million criminal aliens that we know are in the country already, and deal with other high priorities like people who've been deported before, and people who've committed crimes who have skipped out on their hearings so they don't have a conviction. I agree that the law enforcement resources need to be focused on that, but there are ways to process them quickly that don't take a lot of resources. What really needs to happen, too, is we need to have worksite enforcement that can be accomplished through a combination of payroll audits and having the Social Security Administration and the IRS work together to ferret out who's working with fake IDs, and to take action against the employers to create a disincentive for people to coming here. If people can't get a job, they're not going to come illegally, or at least it's going to cut way back on it. So if ICE also focuses some resources on work site enforcement, then some people are going to leave on their own, and they'll be able to devote most of their agent time to the ones who are really a threat to public safety. So a combination of the two approaches is going to work, plus an entry-exit tracking system to deal with the overstays. So anybody who had this idea that a Trump administration was going to have ICE agents out on the street patrolling and, knocking on doors to try to remove every illegal alien is just repeating Hillary Clinton's cartoon version that she wanted people to believe. That's not how immigration enforcement works best, and that's not what the plan is as far as I can see. There are a lot better ways to do it that are, would be better stewardship of taxpayer resources. And at some point, I imagine there probably are going to be people who are now here illegally who are allowed to stay, but, we have to get to a point where the laws are being enforced before that can happen.
Well, now, so I agree. It's funny because we're agreeing on all the same things. I think we're just looking at the schedule in which a lot of these things are done, because one of the other thing I'm looking at here is that there's going to be so much disruptive behavior against Trump for everything that he does.
That we can expect, yes.
Exactly.
I agree.
And any extent that we can lessen that, because the disruption is going to be, it may not disrupt him, but it's going to disrupt the people and the movement that has grown of the awakening American conservative in this country. So I just, I have to say, I think that there's a way there to, because I worked in and around, I'm not going to go into great detail when I was in the FBI, but I worked in and around a lot with illegals and pulling them in and doing mass arrests of a lot of these people that are involved in prostitution and trafficking and stuff. And I definitely see that the ease in which some places where you can go in, Chinatown, other places in big cities where you can go in and literally clean up the whole neighborhood by just walking into restaurants. I mean, boom, 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 you're going to get illegals all over the place. But there's a lot of people that have been here for a long time, and they've been working hard. And while I'm not supporting how they got here, I'm trying to think of a way to lessen the chaos that's going to come from the left. And that's why I think this should at least be tossed around. I'm not even hearing about something and wording it in a way that appeases them, like a contract with undocumented workers. So
yes, I know what you mean. I mean, the opponents of immigration enforcement are already vowing legal action and saying that it can't be done. That these people, that Trump's vision is not going to succeed. I disagree with them. I don't think that when President-elect Trump should apologize for wanting to enforce the law, but he does. I mean, the career people at ICE and the other immigration agencies know how to do this professionally. They know what works, and it's not going to happen overnight. This population of 11.5 million people didn't arrive overnight. We're not going to turn it around in a short period of time. There's going to be some attrition that happens, and that's less disruptive for the economy. It gives employers a chance to adjust their hiring practices so that they comply with the law. And there may be some people who end up being legalized. And maybe what we have to do is cut legal immigration levels so that we can absorb any of the people who've been here illegally for a long time being able to stay in the country. I mean, that's a possible compromise that I think would be popular with a lot of people, and say, okay, if all these people are going to end up staying, we need to put the brakes on legal immigration for a while so that we can put a lot of Americans and other recent arrivals to work in these jobs that have been held by illegal aliens for so long. It's not, I think, anybody sees that we don't want to do something that's disruptive and, harmful to communities.
Right.
But we do need to restore our policy to the point where it's not harming those Americans who deserve a shot at those jobs.
I got like 15 seconds, real quick. I keep getting this over and over and over. George Soros is a real problem for this country. How can we and the federal government go after that guy?
That I don't know, but I do know, if Senator Jeff Sessions becomes Attorney General, those lawsuits stand a much less chance of success. So he'll be throwing his money away.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see that fight.
Yeah, same here. Listen, thank you very much. Have a great Thanksgiving. Jessica Vaughan, Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies, thank you for being here. And I do appreciate your insight.
Thank you. Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.
This is the Sean Hannity Show podcast.
There are so many things that we, not I, we could have done to enhance the campaign of one candidate over another.
A President Donald Trump is going to focus on confronting and defeating radical Islamic terrorism. And we're going to have a president again who will never say what we'll never do.
I am extremely proud of the fact that over 8 years, we have not had the kinds of scandals that have plagued other administrations.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution.
We burning down the night, shooting bullets at the moon, baby. This is how we roll.
Sean Hannity. The new Sean Hannity Show. More behind-the-scenes information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America.
This is Jonathan Gilliam, back for the last hour, filling in for Sean Hannity on the Hannity Radio Show just before Thanksgiving. If you're traveling, if you're out on the road, if you're a trucker driving, if you're a trucker, thank you for bringing the turkeys and the presents that you do every year, for the guns and the bullets that you deliver, for everything that you do for this country. You are the backbone of this country, and we thank you for it, all the truckers out there. I'm going to bring on just a second my friend Laura Munoz, Navy veteran, Dave Robinson, former Marine. Before I bring them on, I just want to tell everybody that I've been talking about my show, The Experts, that I do every night at 9 p.m. on Facebook Live. If you enjoy what you've heard today, come over there every night. Just look up Jonathan T. Gilliam, and what you can do is get involved in the dialogue as I give my spiel and we have the guests and we do the show. You can come on there and tweet, and people have conversations in there in the comments section there. And it's we have a loyal group of followers, and I'd love to hear what you have to say and to keep this movement that has started over the past year of dialogue and unity going. Now, I started a GoFundMe page, gofund.me/The Experts Roadshow. I'm going to put that on my Twitter account, JGilliam_seal, and I'll put it on my Facebook page. What I'm trying to do is raise money to take this show, the Facebook Live show, on the road so that I can give you all the stage and you the mic, and instead of just sitting there, texting back and forth with each other, you can share your concerns. Imagine if we had a rally like Donald Trump had, but I had the stage in the middle of it, and so that everybody gets an opportunity to share what they think. That's what the goal is. The Experts is a show where I don't just have talking heads, I have experts on there. And by and large, the American people you are the experts of this country. You're the experts of freedom. You live in it every day. So gofund.me/The Experts Roadshow. Give me $5. Give whatever you got. Help me get this thing on the road and fund it. And I'll bring the show to your city. Let's go now to my good buddy Dave Robinson, former Marine, West Virginia, my West Virginia reporter on my show, The Experts, and Laura Munoz, a beautiful young woman, former Navy air traffic controller and public affairs. Well, is it public affairs officer or public affairs? What would it be?
Public affairs specialist, Jonathan.
Specialist. There you go. Yeah. Thank you both. And the reason I brought you both on is that, and I'll stop talking here in a second, let you talk, is Laura is younger. She's a millennial, right on the cusp, and I'll say you're on the cusp of being a millennial.
It's okay. I'm 30. We can put that out there.
Dave is my age. Dave's in his 40s. And then I've talked to other people that, have been in their 60s that served in the military. This whole show we've been talking about national security and the dangers to this country. And as I said at the beginning, the biggest national security threat to this country is when the population goes to sleep. A free population that is asleep is a free population that's just waiting to be manipulated by nefarious entities. So I felt it was important to bring Laura and Dave on and talk about this thread of service that only 1% of the population actually commit to, and what it did to you all. Doesn't matter if you're 60 or 30 or 40. What did it do to you to make you see the reality of what freedom is, and what has service done? The service that you've gone out there and done. What did it do to you to help you better yourself as an American? Go ahead, Laura. We'll start with Laura.
Oh, first, Jonathan, I want to thank you for having me on today.
And don't be nervous. There's only 17 million people listening, so don't be nervous, okay? Go ahead.
Well, as long as there's not 18 million, I think we'll be okay.
Your cutoff.
Honestly,
go ahead.
Service has really improved my life and my outlook on life itself. I hate to admit this, but before I joined the military, while in college, like many other college students, I was a hardcore liberal, Democrat, progressive, whatever you want to say. I really thought I knew everything. A lot of college students do, and I think that's the problem today. After I joined the service and I had a little more experience working with people of different cultures and people from all over the country, my attitude changed just because I feel that I matured and understood things more. I think that's part of the problem that we have in society, especially with college-age kids, is they aren't really exposed to other people from other parts of the country. They live in a bubble on their college campuses or around people who have the same, group think that they do. Everyone feels and thinks the same, and they don't celebrate diversity as you do in the military, where you have people of all religions, all skin colors, all ethnicities.
Now, Dave, what about you? Were you liberal when you were younger, or were you conservative your whole life?
I believe everybody's probably liberal when they're younger, just because, right when I was graduating school was when Clinton was running, so he was the one who started going on the MTV, and trying to appeal to all the kids. I'm the cool guy, So, I was, 18 at the time, so I was dumb enough to fall for it too. But
how old were you when you went in the Marine Corps?
I signed up when I was 18, and I was on deferred entry. So when I actually went to boot camp, I was 19.
Gotcha. That's young. And so how did it change you? Once you got in there and you went through, boot camp in the Marine Corps is not easy. And so they have I tell you, the Marines have an incredible way of breaking a person down and building them into a Marine, which is why I always say leaders are not born. Some people are born with leadership skills, but by and large, leaders are created through life experiences.
Yes.
The Marine Corps does a great job of secreting those life experiences into your brain.
I think one of the biggest things for me, because, I'm just from a tiny little town here in West Virginia, and we had one Hispanic person in my school, one black person in my school, and an Asian foreign exchange student and a Spanish foreign exchange student. So that was as much as I had. I didn't know anybody, just because they weren't around. So you got TV constantly beating to you. Well, this is how this group of people thinks, and this is how this group of people thinks. And they just constantly, divide everybody up and just put you into these little groups. Well, the military don't do that. As soon as you go in, you're all in there. You're all dressed the same. You're all, you look the same. You got the same bad haircut. You've everything about you, and you're all fighting or just whatever it is that, working for the same goal. So going in there, that was my first exposure to, people of other races, other backgrounds, people who, just grew up in some of these awful places like Chicago and things, where people, there was gang members and things, and that just kind of blew my mind when, especially like getting out of boot camp and you start seeing people how they are when they put on their civilian clothes and the music they're into. But then, you realize that, you're great friends with these people, that you're not really different. And that was the biggest change for me. And that's,
what's interesting? What's interesting that you're both saying there is that, and I want the American people to really think about this. When you go into the military, and I have the same experience. I went as an officer. I was trained by a Marine Corps drill instructor and officer, and Navy officer candidate school, John Crouch, who I've had on this program before, amazing leader. And we are taught, whether it's Laura, Dave, myself, or anybody else that's out there that served, we're taught standard operating procedures. We're taught task organization. We're taught how to streamline things and how to work together. And it's interesting because the military is teaching in boot camp exactly what you should understand as an American citizen, somebody who is a free citizen. But because the family structure has completely disintegrated in this country, those things are not taught. And those are basic human, any human being that is somebody who strives to be the best they can be are going to learn those things, but they're not taught. They're not taught in school. They're not taught in the family. And most people, a lot of people, especially in the inner city, don't even have families. Laura?
Yeah, it's a shame. I believe that, what is the statistic? Nearly 75% of all African American children are born out of wedlock.
Yeah.
It's hard because, is that correct?
Yeah, but it's unbelievable. Right. Yeah, it's a huge
It is unbelievable. It's unfortunate, too, because these children, a lot of them don't have father figures in their life to teach them right from wrong. And not saying that a mother or a single father can't teach a child, but it is important to have those two different dynamic roles in order to, raise a good child in a lot of these areas.
Mm-hmm.
And if a single parent, such as a mother, is busy working all the time and there's not a father around, who is watching these children? They're getting raised by the streets. And that is another issue that we have, which is contributing to the crime in inner cities.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, I agree. When they're put in that position, when you grow up like that, and it doesn't matter what race you are, but when you're in an area and you grow up like that and you have the media and everybody else constantly giving you a free pass that, you're doing this because things are so bad where you live, there's, nobody has any incentive to change any of that, to be a better person or, anything.
Right. It's interesting, Dave. You told me, and I grew up in Arkansas, this very similar circumstances. People used to, have their rifles in their trucks, and in your case, they would go hunting and carry the guns and put them in their lockers at school.
Yeah, squirrel season, you can count on it.
Yeah, and so as the family disintegrated, as the politicians, the liberal left, and these communists that we were talking about earlier step in, the first thing they want to do is get rid of the guns. They'll come up with any excuse to get rid of the freedom of to bear arms. It's just so interesting how, and I'm sure, I don't know if that's the way it was with you, Laura, where you grew up, but, it was just a way of life and responsibility of firearms and responsibility and understanding of why you could carry those things. It was just part of who you were.
It was like that where I grew up. Actually, I'm not sure where Dave is from in West Virginia, but I'm from the Mahoning County area, which is Youngstown, Ohio, and we're only, a good 20, 30 minutes from West Virginia. So I grew up in a rural town in Columbiana County, which we didn't even have a stoplight in our town. Our highlight was a Dairy Queen.
Hey, we got one.
I didn't have a lot of diversity in my school system either. I graduated with about 59 kids in my graduating class. I don't believe we had any black children, any Asian children, anyone besides white people. And so it was actually a great experience for me to go to college and to be in the military so I could meet people and learn about people from different cultures, because I didn't get that where I was growing up. And they also didn't understand our, how do I say this, our interest in hunting and carrying guns. It was nothing to us where I'm from, but it was a very big deal. And carrying guns to them was different than it was to us in the rural towns.
Right.
That's a big thing, too, because it wasn't just my getting out here and seeing these people. It's the people that I were friends with, they never imagined they'd be friends with some, guy from a hick town in West Virginia, and you can always spot military guys when you go out of town because they all dress so different. You got this guy who's got, cowboy boots on and a 50-gallon hat, and another guy's got his big pants on and everything else, and a hat cocked sideways. It's just hilarious to see. But
yeah, it's funny because you would never catch people that are that look that different together. Normally, the guy with a hat would be with somebody with a hat, and vice versa. Listen, I got about 30 seconds left, so real quick, I want to ask both of you. What do you want the American public to know about service? Real quick, about 30 seconds to 15 seconds each. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was going to say ladies first. Well, I think it's important. I think it grooms leaders, And, whether you don't have to be somebody's going to be a CEO in a company or, even the president, but just a leader in community or a leader in your family.
Laura, go ahead.
It just teaches you to work with one another just like our politicians should in Washington, D.C. You're not all the same, you don't agree the same, but you have to have a one common goal for the American people, and that is to get things done.
Awesome. Look, I gave them 30 seconds, and they did it. Thank you both. God bless you. Have a great Thanksgiving. Laura Munoz and Dave Robson, two American hero veterans. Thank you. Well, this is Sean Hannity Radio Show. Guys, we'll be right back.
Hannity Headline, a bite-sized version of the show that you can take with you everywhere you go. To sign up today for Hannity Headlines, go to Hannity.com.
I just want to say thank you. You saved me in so many ways. In recent years, I've been struggling with an incurable illness, and I'm on home care now. It was caused by a doctor's medical negligence. And in those dark days, fighting, right now all the tubes have been removed, and I have a do not resuscitate order, and I have a 7-year-old son. In those days in the hospital, I received from you a handwritten letter that said, "To the bravest woman I know."
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
And you,
such a wonderful, beautiful woman. I mean, just an amazing woman. And are you coming along okay?
No, sir, but that's okay, because I'm here right now to thank you in person, and that was my biggest dream. And I wanted to thank you because through you and your organizations, my son, who is Mexican-American, 7 years old, through your organizations, and just being able to stand on that stage with you back in 2005, the outpouring of love that came from that ultimately provided my son, when he graduates high school, with a full ride to college. And that was
great.
Because of you.
And you know what we'll do? We're going to watch him. You're going to watch him, Tana. Tana, watch him.
And,
we're going to be watching your boy, okay? But you're going to hopefully be around. You're not going to have anybody watching. You're going to hopefully be around. Those doctors are going to be so wrong. But we'll be helping you.
Man, I love that. I love the fact that he said, besides her beautiful heart, the fact that he said we're going to be watching him. I mean, that is a leader. That's awesome. I mean, that kind of choked me up a little bit there. That was, in case you don't know who that was, that's Melissa Young, the former Miss Wisconsin contestant who is suffering from an incurable illness caused by actually a doctor's negligence. And her health has taken a turn for the worse. Coming on with me now to talk more about this. I didn't get to meet her election night. I was really looking forward to meeting her, but I didn't get to meet Melissa. But Rose Tennant, who is the host of Rose Unplugged, who I've been on her show, incredible woman, incredible show. You know Melissa personally, and you all have set up a GoFundMe page, and everybody can find that at the top of Hannity.com. So if you're touched by that like I am, go and help them out. And help Melissa out. But, Rose, tell us more about what's going on and about Melissa.
Jonathan, how are you?
I'm good. Good to have you on.
Good to talk to you. Yeah, it's interesting because you and I were having coffee, and I was checking my email when we were in the city together not so long ago. And I was checking my email, and that's when I found out that I did, in fact, get a ticket to the victory party for Melissa. And I have to tell you, Jonathan, that was something that she had hoped all along that she would be able to do.
She helped make that happen. I was
happy to. I was happy to do that for her. And she was thrilled. And her image was plastered all over the Daily Mail, the CNN, Fox, Judge Perino's show. All you could see was her ecstatic reaction to his win when Hillary conceded. And she was holding a Women for Trump sign. And Jonathan, I was so happy. I think if I have ever done anything in my life that made me proud, aside from having a child that I absolutely adore, it would be that moment, knowing that she was able to experience that in person. And, the thing is, and why this is relevant to the show that you're doing today, and you're doing a great job, by the way, I've been listening.
Thank you.
The reason this is relevant is for, there's a number of reasons. And in fact, there's a story that I contribute to Spectator.org, the American Spectator, and there's a beautiful story there if you have a chance, and much of it's in her own words and the rest is in mine. But at Spectator.org, all you have to do is search for Melissa Young. But Melissa, is one of those Trump supporters that just never gave up. Mm-hmm. And she decided that she wanted to go public with her support and make it known that, especially during a time when he was being criticized, when he was being challenged on his position on women, and she knew better. She knew the kind of man he was. She understood and experienced firsthand how he treated women. So she felt it was her obligation to speak out on behalf of Mr. Trump. And so she did from the beginning. But as a result, she's had death threats. And the last time I was on with Sean, we talked about someone breaking into her home, 2 attempts. The second attempt was successful only in that they were able to break in to the garage and steal her car. Just for anyone out there, though, that will never happen again. There are lots of people guarding that home very, very carefully. I wouldn't mess with it again. But
I hope they do. I hope they try, and I hope they get whacked. That's what I hope.
Seriously, this is just so awful, Jonathan. But and this is because this woman spoke out on behalf of our now president-elect, Donald Trump. So she's a brave woman. She's a courageous woman. She's one of those kind of women, Jonathan, and Lauren, Sean's associate producer there, knows well as well, that I've never met anyone like her, and I really don't expect that I will again. And I feel that I've been blessed and fortunate to have known and loved her and to be loved by her. But what's interesting is that anyone who knows her story, anyone that reads about her, has seen her and heard what she's had to say, they feel that they've come to know her in some special way as well. And she represents all of us. She represents those of us who have been beaten down, who have been, threatened, or people have come against us for our support of our now new president. And she represents us. She's someone who says, I'm just like everybody else, but she's more than anybody else. She's sick, and yet and the weird thing is she looks so beautiful that you don't even realize how sick.
That's what I was going to say. She obviously she's so beautiful that she's this sick and still looks amazing. I mean, I get a cold. You can ask anybody. I'm like a big crybaby.
She always tells me that she's going to put lipstick on so the devil doesn't recognize her.
She ain't going where the devil's going to be. Trust me on that one.
Right. No, she isn't, because she is not. And that's the other thing, Jonathan. I'm so glad you brought that up. I am a person of faith. I love God and trust Him tremendously. This is a woman whose faith is unshakable. This is a woman who, no matter what cards have been dealt to her, still considers herself blessed and fortunate. And I really think I think of Esther when I think of her, that she was here for such a time as this, that she has done her duty. She has done her job. And, the Miss America 2005, Chelsea Cooley, set up a GoFundMe page for Melissa because, the health care bills have taken its toll. Thank you, Obamacare. And, and other issues that they've had to face. And so Chelsea started this GoFundMe page. And I'll tell you something. Melissa would have never, ever told anyone about this page because that's not who she is. But I'm telling people.
Well, we're going to tell people today about it.
That's right. And thanks. And you can always go to Rose Unplugged, which is my Facebook, Unplugged, UNPLUGGED. And then I think I heard you say that there's a link on Hannity as well.
It's on the top of the page on Hannity. Yep.
Mm.
Listen,
wow.
Tell her, if you talk to her, I wish she was listening today, I'd tell her myself that we love her, and we know that God has blessed her and has blessed her child. And, here's the important thing. There's people, I know this is hard to realize, but 100% of us will all die, and the great vast majority of people will live their lives in vain. And she is not one of those people. She is somebody who's making the most out of her life.
That is so well said. You're absolutely right about that. And when Mr. Trump said that we'll be watching your boy, we are all, Jonathan, I know you agree with me, going to be watching her boy.
Yeah. Hey, listen, God bless you, Rose, and thank you for thinking of her and coming on here. And I can't wait to be on your show again. So,
yeah.
Listen, thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
You too.
Happy Thanksgiving to Melissa Young and to her son. Go to Hannity, to his page, and at the top of the page, donate to her GoFundMe page and to Rose's page, Rose Unplugged. This is the Hannity Radio Show.